Hello, my friend. It is wonderful to have you here. Tonight, a quiet question. A boy grows up with the ball at his feet from the moment he can walk. Every scout in his country says he is special. Every coach calls him a future star. And yet, for 9 long years, the football world looks at him and shakes its head. They call him fragile. They call him finished. They say his body cannot survive the game. So here is the strange thing. He did not win the Ballon d'Or because he was stronger than anyone else. He won it because, for almost a decade, he had to fight harder just to stay on the pitch. His weakness, in the end, became the thing that made him. We begin tonight not in Paris and not on a golden stage. We begin in a small gray town called Évreux, in the Madeleine quarter, about 90 kilometers west of the capital. Concrete buildings, narrow streets, and football cages where the goals have no nets. This is where our story starts. At 15, he was already in a professional academy. At 16, he was the youngest scorer in his league. At 17, a giant from Germany paid 15 million euros for a boy who had not yet finished school. 3 numbers. A childhood, a gift, and a price. This is the story of Ousmane Dembélé. And if you enjoy sitting by the fire with stories like this one, subscribing to the channel is the warmest way to keep me company. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Vernon, in Normandy, a town of about 12,000 people along the Seine. A maternity ward on the 15th of May, 1997. A woman named Fatimata Dembélé holds her newborn son for the first time. Her husband, Moussa, is from Mali. He left West Africa years before, crossed the Sahara, crossed the Mediterranean in his imagination, if not always on his feet, and settled in France to work in a factory. He had been an amateur footballer himself, a small local hero in his own village. But factories do not care about tricks on a Sunday pitch. Moussa works long hours, and Fatimata raises the children mostly on her own. They moved to Évreux, to the Madeleine quarter, a working-class estate of concrete and small flats. Their older son, Moussa Jr., is already kicking a ball in the courtyard, and little Ousmane, barely able to walk, is watching his brother with wide eyes. By the time he is 4, he has his first ball. By 6, he is the smallest child in every match, but the one who never stops running. Let me tell you a small secret now, because every great life has a hidden door, and we are about to open his. His full name is not just Ousmane. His full name is Massour Ousmane Dembélé. In Senegalese and Wolof tradition, the first name a parent gives is never a casual choice. Massour means something very specific. It means, roughly, the one who replaces. It is a name given to a child born into a family that has already lost one. A name whispered by grief, not by celebration. Fatimata chose that name in a small hospital in Vernon, far from the bright lights of Dakar or Paris, long before her son ever touched a football. For 28 years, almost nobody in the French press has ever used it. Tonight, you will. Millions of people around the world now know the name Dembélé. Almost none of them know where it truly began, in a mother's quiet conversation with sorrow, in a town no camera ever visited. Now, remember this next detail. I want you to keep it in your mind. 3 numbers. The first number is 8. The second is 2. The third is the year 2025. Hold them gently, my friend. You will see them again in the perfect moment at the end of this story. When Ousmane is 8 years old, Fatimata goes to the market in Évreux. She does not have much money, but she has saved enough for one small gift. She comes home with a plastic bag. Inside the bag is a pair of football boots, second-hand, from another family's child who is already grown. They are 2 sizes too big for her son. They were cheaper that way. She places them on the kitchen table and says very quietly, "These will have to last, my son." Usman takes the boots, and because his feet slide inside, Fatimata stuffs newspaper into the toes so he can run without losing his step. He would later say, with a small smile, that he learned to play with his heart because he could never really feel the ball in his feet. The shoes did not know his shape. So he invented his own, and the streets of Madeleine taught him everything else. The concrete cages had no nets and no referees. Children 3 years older than him waited inside, bigger, stronger, rougher. They pushed him. They kicked him. Sometimes they laughed when he fell. Usman would stand up, dust his knees, and smile. The street does not teach you to fear pain. The street teaches you that pain is just the price of the next touch. So he would go again, and again, and again, until the older boy stopped laughing and started watching. There is one more thing you should notice about that kitchen table: the newspaper. Fatimata stuffed it into his boots so he could play. Years later in Barcelona, he will read his name printed in newspaper headlines that called him fragile, called him a patient, called him a mistake. And on Champions League nights, when he packs his bag for an away match, there is always a folded newspaper inside, a private joke, a quiet nod to a mother and a kitchen and a pair of boots that never quite fit. And so the question is no longer whether he can survive the cages of Madeleine. The question now is what happens when a boy who learned his craft in concrete, who carries a name that means the one who replaces, who stuffed newspaper into shoes that were 2 sizes too big, finally steps out of Évreux and into the rest of the world. And the world, my friend, is not always kind to quiet boys from small towns. What happens next is a story of being taken away from home at 13, of standing alone in giant academies, and of a body that, for many years, simply refused to keep up with his dreams. But we will speak of that next time, by the same fire. A few months before his 14th birthday, a man from Clairefontaine drove to Évreux. Clairefontaine is the academy where France keeps its most precious boys, the same place that built Thierry Henry, that built Nicolas Anelka, that built Kylian Mbappé a few years later. A small, quiet campus hidden in the forests south of Paris, far from cities and far from families. The scout watched Usman play one match on a wet Sunday morning, and he made 3 phone calls before the boy had even taken his boots off. By Friday, a contract was on Fatimata's kitchen table. On Sunday, a car came to collect him. I want you to imagine this, my friend, because it is important. A 13-year-old boy packing a small bag in a small flat. The boots from the plastic bag, of course, were already too small. So he left them in the bottom of the wardrobe, next to Fatimata's folded newspaper. He kissed his mother at the door. She did not cry. She had decided, years before, that crying was a luxury she could not afford. He climbed into the back seat, and the car pulled away from the Madeleine Quarter. In the rear window, the concrete cages grew smaller and smaller, until they disappeared behind a roundabout on the edge of town. And here is the moment I want you to keep in your heart. 2 years later, in the autumn of 2015, a trial match was arranged at Rennes, the big professional club in Brittany. The academy coaches had heard about the boy from Clairefontaine. They wanted to see him with their own eyes against their own reserves. So one Tuesday afternoon, a slight 18-year-old walked onto the training pitch. He was wearing boots that did not belong to him. Borrowed kit, borrowed boots, borrowed everything. And the senior academy players, some of them 23, 24 years old, were warming up when he arrived. The coach blew his whistle. I do not know what happened in the next 90 minutes, because no film exists of that trial. But I know what the staff said afterwards, because they said it many times to anyone who would listen. 3 of the older coaches stopped writing in their notebooks. They put down their pens. They stopped talking to each other. They simply watched. One of them, years later, tried to describe it with a small shrug. He did things, the coach said, that you cannot coach. You cannot teach that. You are born with it, or you are not. He was born with it. There is a word in French football for this kind of silence. They call it le silence du stade, the silence of the stadium. It is the moment when 20,000 people stop breathing because something impossible is happening on the pitch. That afternoon, on a training ground in Brittany, 11 men behind a metal fence discovered their own small version of that silence. And the boy in the borrowed boots had not even turned 18. His first professional contract arrived in October 2012, when he was 15 years and 4 months old, a child with a legal guardian's signature on page 3. Rennes kept him patient. They fed him slowly, like a chef with a very young wine. He sat on the bench for weeks. He watched. He learned. And then, on the 6th of November 2015, at the Rojan Park Stadium, the coach finally said his name. He came on as a substitute against Angers in the 72nd minute. The stadium held almost 30,000 people. He was 18 years, 175 days old, and when his foot first touched a Ligue 1 ball, he became the youngest player ever to represent Stade Rennais in the top flight of French football. A record. A quiet, small, almost secret record, the kind that journalists bury in the 7th paragraph of a match report. But he remembers it. You could see it in his face even then. Not pride, something calmer. The look of a boy who has been waiting a long time for a door to open and who walks through it without running. His first goal came 2 months later, on the 9th of January 2016, against Nantes. 18 years, 239 days old. He received the ball near the penalty spot, turned, and finished into the bottom corner with his left foot. The Rojan Park rose. He did not celebrate. He simply walked back to the center circle, adjusted the lace of a borrowed boot, and waited for kickoff. His teammates, most of them 5 or 6 years older, looked at each other and nodded slowly. They had seen the boy from Clairefontaine before, but they had not yet seen the man. By the end of that season, the awards began. Ligue 1 Young Player of the Year, a nomination for the main team of the year, invitations to the French under-21 setup, headlines in the local press that used words like future, phenomenon, once in a generation, and the question that every great young player in the world eventually has to answer. Are you the next one? Are you the new Thierry Henry? The new Ronaldinho? The new Zidane? He never answered it. Not once. Not in any interview, not to any journalist, not to any coach. He would smile, lift one shoulder, and say something careful, something modest, something that kept the fire small, as if he knew, in some quiet corner of his mind, that loud words have a way of bringing loud falls. And then, at the end of that season, his body whispered its first warning. A hamstring pull in April, 6 weeks on the treatment table, the first line of a medical file that would grow over the next decade into a thick, heavy binder. He said nothing about it. The club said nothing about it. But somewhere inside Rennes, in a small office behind the dressing room, someone began to think a thought that would one day become a headline. And the thought was this: what if the body cannot keep up with the boy? What if the gift is real, but the vessel is too fragile to carry it? We will speak next time of Germany, of Barcelona, of 105 million euros, and of a decade the football world would later call the longest injury in modern football. The fire is still here. Stay close. Dortmund was fast. Everything about Borussia Dortmund moves fast. The yellow wall, the press, the counterattacks, the way the stadium shakes when the Südtribüne decides to sing. Ousmane arrived there in the summer of 2016, and for 12 months his life looked, for the first time, like the dream everyone had promised him. He played in the Champions League that winter, against Monaco, against a young Mbappe who would later become a friend and a rival. He was still only 19. The world was beginning to learn his name. And then, in August 2017, A phone call came from Barcelona. The number was not for him. It was for his agent, for his family, for a city of 5 million people who needed a new king after Neymar had left for Paris. The fee was written down on paper, and the paper, this time, was heavier than any newspaper Fatimata had ever packed into a kitchen. 105 million euros, 40 million more if he won the Ballon d'Or. 145 million in total. On the 25th of August 2017, he stood on the Camp Nou pitch in the blue and claret of Barcelona, shirt number 11 on his back, and he smiled the small, careful smile of a boy who knew the world was watching and did not trust the world to stay. Now I want to stop you for a moment, my friend. I want you to lean in, because in about 90 seconds, I'm going to tell you about a number that fell. A record that stood for 27 years, a record set by a Frenchman in a French shirt on a French summer night, a record almost everyone in football believed would never, ever be broken. I will not tell you the record yet. I will only tell you this. When it falls, you will feel it. The name of the man who set it is one of the 3 or 4 names you have heard since you first loved this game. Barcelona for him was not a fairy tale. It was a waiting room. 8 separate muscle injuries between 2017 and 2021. More than 80 missed matches. Headlines in Mundo Deportivo that called him the eternal patient. A physio's clipboard that knew his name better than his teammates did. By 2020, the Catalan press had a word for him. They wrote it in big letters at the top of the page. They wrote it without shame. The word was finished. The word was mistake. The word was a price tag of 145 million euros, written as a debt, not as a gift. Ronald Koeman, the coach in 2021, played him only 11 times in the league. There was a meeting late in the year in a small room upstairs at the training ground. The decision, almost, was made. Sell him. Take the loss. Let him go. A number was even whispered. 25 million. A fraction. A wound dressed as a price. And then Xavi came home. Xavi Hernandez arrived at the Camp Nou in November 2021, with the same quiet hands that once picked the lock of every midfield in Europe. He looked at Ousmane for a long time before he spoke. He did not speak about tactics. He spoke about trust. He said, very slowly, that the boy had not broken. The boy had only been asked to be something he was not. Xavi moved him. He moved him to the right wing first, then to the left, then into the spaces behind a striker. The body began to listen. The body began, finally, to cooperate. By 2022-2023, the goals returned. 8 goals and 9 assists in the league, a Copa del Rey trophy, and on the 14th of May 2023, a Sunday afternoon at the Camp Nou, the last whistle blew on the La Liga title. The first league championship in 4 years. Barcelona's, and, somewhere inside it, a small piece of his. That night, long after the cameras had gone, long after the dressing room had emptied, Ousmane sat alone on the grass of the Camp Nou. His socks were rolled down to his ankles. He was looking at his calves, the scars of 8 injuries, 8 comebacks, 8 mornings when the physio's face told him what the press would say before the press had finished typing. He sat there for a long time. Then he stood up, walked to the dressing room, opened his locker, and looked for a moment at his boots. He did not put them on. He closed the door quietly, and he went home. A year later, in August 2023, Paris Saint-Germain paid 50 million euros for him. A strange fee for a man the world had decided was finished. But Luis Enrique, the new coach, looked at the same body the press had buried and saw something else. He saw a man who could play as a false 9, a man who could touch the ball 15 times in the box and change a match, a man whose first step, even now, even after everything, was still quicker than almost anyone alive. In 2024 and 2025, the boy from Vernon became the man from Paris. 53 matches, 35 goals, 16 assists. League One top scorer, League One Player of the Year, Champions League top scorer with 8 goals. PSG won the league. PSG won the cup. PSG went to Munich, to the final, on the 31st of May 2025, and lost 1-0 to Inter in the 88th minute of a match they had deserved to win. He cried that night. He held his daughter's hand as he walked off the pitch, her tiny PSG shirt glowing under the floodlights. And then came the 22nd of September, 2025. The Théâtre du Châtelet, Paris. The Ballon d'Or. The trophy is 7.5 kilograms of brass plated in gold. It was first given in 1956. Only 2 Frenchmen had ever held it before him. Michel Platini, 3 times, in 1983, 84, 85. Karim Benzema, in 2022. 27 years since a French player had lifted this prize. 27 years since a Parisian had lifted it. The record stood where records stand. Quiet, untouchable, waiting. Ousmane Dembélé walked onto the stage. He was 28 years and 130 days old. He lifted the trophy. The room stood. The cameras flashed. And then, as he walked backstage, the photographer stopped him. The photographer had seen the boots. They were new. They were custom made. They were gold. They fit him perfectly, for the first time in his life. He looked down at them. He was silent for 3 seconds. Then he said, very quietly, so quietly the microphone almost missed it, "She bought me boots that didn't fit. 20 years later, I finally found the pair that did." Then the camera found his mother. Fatimata was in the 3rd row. She was standing. Tears were running down her face. The boy she had named Massour, the one who replaces, had not replaced anyone. He had arrived, at last, on his own. I still think about that moment. After Munich, the world began to make its usual noise. Offers arrived from places Dembélé had never visited, in languages he did not yet speak. His name was printed in contracts thicker than any newspaper Fatimata had ever folded. He signed a new deal with PSG that keeps him in Paris until the summer of 2028, and inside it, a number large enough to make the Évreux kitchen table feel like a different century. Sponsors wanted his face. Fashion houses wanted his silence. Photographers wanted the boots again, the golden ones, always the boots. And yet, the cost is real, my friend, and it should be said without drama. The trophy on his shelf is heavy, but the heaviest thing he carried in 2025 was the one he did not lift. The Champions League final in Munich. 88th minute. 1-0 to Inter. A match his team had deserved to win and did not. He cried in the tunnel that night, quietly, the way men cry when the locker room is still half full. He held his daughter Évreux's hand as he walked back to the dressing room, her tiny PSG shirt glowing under the floodlights, and a foreign striker was lifting the trophy he had spent a year dreaming about. There is no fairy tale here. There is only the long walk from the pitch to the parking lot, and a father carrying a 3-year-old who does not yet know what her father lost. He answered that loss the only way he knew how. He went back to training on the 3rd of June. He did not post a long message. He did not give a filmed interview about grief. He simply worked. And the next September, when the Ballon d'Or was placed into his hands, he held it the way he holds everything, carefully, as if he still remembers the weight of borrowed boots. I should tell you, since we are speaking honestly tonight, that the story is still moving. The new Champions League campaign is underway as you listen to me. The 2025 Ballon d'Or has been won, but football does not pause for trophies. By the time this video reaches you, the table may already look different. The scorers may have changed. The next chapter may have already begun. We are telling this story while the season is still breathing. Where is he today, the boy from Vernon? He is in Paris, in a flat not far from the Parc des Princes, with Rima, with Évreux, with a second child on the way. On Sundays, when the schedule allows, he drives the 90 minutes back to Évreux. He parks near the Madeleine Quarter. He walks past the concrete cages where the goals still have no nets. He does not stop for photographs. He stops because the street is where the boy was built, and a man who forgets his own street will eventually forget his own name. And the symbol returns, one last time as it must. The boots. Fatimata's plastic bag from the market, 20 years ago, 2 sizes too big, stuffed with newspaper. He keeps a pair of those old boots in his home in Paris, not on display, not for guests. They sit in a hallway cupboard, next to the cleaning products, next to the spare umbrellas. Once, when a close friend asked him why he had kept them, he looked at the friend for a long time and said only, "Because the next room is built on this one." That gesture is not for the cameras. It is for the streets that believed in him before the world did. There is one thing this story keeps reminding me, my friend. When you grow up with very little, you stop being afraid of losing. You have already lost. The boots did not fit. The money was never enough. The injury list was longer than the trophy cabinet. And so when the big stage finally arrives, you do not tremble. You simply play. The fear went out of the room a long time ago. What was left was the craft and the love and a quiet, stubborn refusal to disappear. If there is something in your life right now that feels too big, too far, too heavy, a dream, a door, a question you have been avoiding, I want you to remember the name Masur for a moment and then forget it. You are not the one who replaces. You are the first. You will be measured by the years you missed, not only by the years you played. And the comeback is always longer than the fall. Carry your own Évreux with you, the place that built you, the street, the kitchen, the pair of shoes that never quite fit. It is the only honest luggage you will ever own. Thank you, truly, for spending this quiet hour with me. I am grateful for your company and for your attention, which is the rarest gift of all. Now, my friend, tell me in the comments which moment will stay with you the longest. Was it the plastic bag on the kitchen table in Évreux, the 3-second silence backstage at the Théâtre du Châtelet, or the small walk back through the Madeleine cages on a quiet Sunday afternoon? I read every comment you leave. Until next time, take care of yourself.